Hello, and welcome, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Making MMC Work for You. The session's going to be recorded, so if you're listening to it live, great. If you're listening to it live in your own time, fantastic as well. My name's Jake Snell. I'm from Abry. We're one of South of England's largest housing providers. We look after some 80,000 customers across 35,000 homes. And I also work very closely with the Building Better team. I have the great privilege and pleasure of hosting this webinar today, which looks to explore why MMC is such an important and needed step change in housing delivery, and perhaps some of the key drivers behind it and how they have evolved over recent times. And fundamentally, how your business can navigate and embrace MMC. We're joined today by some fantastic speakers from Homes England. We have Versha Correa, Head of Affordable Housing and Growth in the Southwest, together with Jimmy Overill, who's their Growth Manager. We also have Stephen Lodge, Exec Director of Development and Strategic Asset Management at Abry. We have Glynis Paul, Planning, Technical and Sustainability Director at Live West. And we have Helen Coombs, Development Director at the Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames. We've got a couple of polls that we want to do as well today, but we also would encourage the audience to really feed into the comment bar any questions that you're faced with at the moment, any interesting kind of feedback that you've got. Please do provide your comments, and I will try to bring that into the conversation. But before we start, I guess I just want to set the scene really, and a little bit of background about where we are as Abry. Like many housing providers, MMC's a really important part of Abry's development programme. It's going to help us deliver at least 10,000 new affordable and sustainable homes by 2030. And we'll do that by delivering more than 25% of those building using MMC. And how do we get on this journey? Well, we're going to enable this by the work that we're doing in collaboration with Advantage Southwest and Building Better consortiums. With that, Building Better, it's extremely exciting times for Building Better and its members. We've just launched our first Category 1 MMC framework. Now, for those that don't know, Category 1 is the modular framework. That is the utopian version, I suppose, of MMC, is the big boxes on the back of lorries that get delivered to site pretty much complete. The framework's very unique to the marketplace. It's a direct call-off, which means you don't have to go through the pain and heartache of any procurement route. So that's all done before you. It's completely cost transparent, and we've selected 3 providers to do that for you. And I guess it's even more exciting for housing associations and local authorities. Because of where we are in the sector, we have a genuine opportunity to help shape this industry for the future. So in terms of order of the session today, we're going to kick off with Versha and Jimmy from Homes England, and they're going to be looking at the key drivers behind MMC. They're going to walk us through and navigate what they've been doing and how they're navigating and supporting the sector and their findings so far, and what they're going to be doing moving forward to really cement that data. We were due an address from the Housing Minister today, but unfortunately, due to other commitments, he's unable to attend. But I can confirm he will attend our webinar on the 15th of September, so that's some great news. Following the presentation from Homes England, we'll then be holding a roundtable session with 3 of the sector leads. The roundtable session, we want it to be really conversational. We want it to be like a bit of a podcast. I've given the panelists some sort of free rein to really challenge each other, so it should be quite exciting and interesting. But during that session, we're going to explore their approach really to investing in MMC, their internal business cases, how that aligns with their strategic goals, and how it's playing out in the projects on the ground and how they see that moving forward. But again, we're really, really interested to hear from the audience, their thoughts, their challenges and their questions. So again, please, throughout the whole session, but certainly in the roundtable, please put your comments into the comment box, and I'll try and draw that back in into the conversation. So before I pass over to Homes England, we're going to do a very quick poll just to sort of do a bit of a temperature test, really. So hopefully I can get Lucinda to put a poll on the screen. So you'll see there. So it's only one pick, and it's just to sort of see what the main kind of barriers are, really. So what do you feel are the barriers your organisation face with MMC? Certainty around quality, procurement, complexities and understanding of products. There's a lot out there, or the perception of costs. I guess, you know, the perception is that it's going to be higher. Just be interested if everyone can kind of put their point in there, and we can sort of do a temperature test, and then we'll work that through a bit later. So hopefully the results will pop up very soon. Interesting. So I guess it was the one that we thought might come through, and we might be able to play into some early news on that a bit later on in the session. So thank you for all playing part of that. So without further ado, I am going to pass over to Versha and Jimmy of Homes England.
Lovely. Cheers for that, Jake. Can you let me know if you can see them slides?
I can, Jimmy. Thank you.
I'll just put that in slides. Lovely. So firstly, thanks for inviting us here to speak today. There's nothing we love more at Homes England than an opportunity to blow our own trumpet, and hopefully there's a couple of slides in here that will help me do that. So my colleague and Versha and I are planning to talk through a couple of things that we're doing around MMC. So Versha is going to start by talking about our business case, our commitment to MMC delivery, where we see the drivers and why we have committed to driving that uptake across the industry. Then we're going to talk through some of the examples of the activity that we're up to. So ranging from educational pieces, such as the MMC Research Commission, looking at what we're doing with disposals on our land and how we've been driving our delivery partners to be a bit more ambitious, a bit more innovative and do a bit more. Versha is then going to talk about some of the varied investment deals that we get involved in, whether that be a factory loan or a project loan, and how that's bringing some delivery to the sector. Crucially, we'll talk about AHP 21-26, how MMC plays into the CME route, and also what it is that we've asked of our strategic partners. And finally, and probably most importantly, we're looking at conducting some learning webinars moving forward, but we're aware that we need to get a bit of a pulse check in terms of where you are on your journey and what areas it is that you need Homes England's help in trying to unblock. So we'll talk about that at the end. So if I pass over to Versha, and she's going to talk about our strategic objectives.
Thanks, Jimmy. So for us at Homes England, it's really important to understand it is a strategic objective. Our work on MMC is very much linked to our increasing productivity strategic aim stated in our plan 28-23. And whilst we are reviewing our strategic plan, there's no expectation of this particular productivity plan to move or change. So that's where we come from. It's a strategic objective. And one of the things that we've been doing as Homes England is looking at the barriers from our experience, some of the reports that we've reviewed. And it's quite useful to see where the audience today have reflected on the report. For us, we've identified 6 areas. One is the volume certainty that's been stated, both from suppliers, manufacturers of MMC, and from the people who want to call those off. So today's really useful exercise and learning what the Building Better procurement's going to do, because actually that's a key route to alleviating some of the concerns about volume certainty. Another one we've identified is, sorry, just go back a minute, Jim. I'll just run through them really quickly. So there's working capital, and that's to do with when financing happens. And there's a mismatch from upfront costs and payments. Innovation capital, so we're really keen to support venture capital funding for startups in construction. I think everybody will know that if you are looking for affordable housing grant, the homes need to be credited. We'll come on to that a bit later, but that's been seen as an issue for some people. interoperability is a long word, but actually what we mean is, standardization in the supply chain. So if one supplier can't get your bathroom units or the piping for it, you should be able to get it from somewhere else. Some of that standardization would make it easier. And the final one, which we know is on the agenda for today, is the education. And Jimmy's going to pick that up at the end. Thanks, Jim. And for us, there are a number of opportunities. We're looking at, as an agency, we do have a track record. We do bring land to the market. From a government point of view, we are the agency that helps the government deliver their housing strategy. And so obviously there is an interest from central government, and that's there's a lot of dialogue between Homes England and MHCLG on what that might look like, how our interface could be, coordinating between us and the market, tackling some of those barriers that we just discussed. In there, there's also markets seeking new products, willing to experiment, some of that innovation. I think we've been talking about how to improve the supply chain for over a decade, and it's never quite crystallized, so now's the time. And the next section, I'm handing back to you, Jimmy.
Yep, thanks very much. So one of the examples of the activity that we're in, and probably the best example of educational pieces that we're delivering, is the MMC Research Commission. So firstly, why is it that we're doing one? Well, we wanted to provide an opportunity for developers to show that greater level of MMC ambition than what we're currently getting on disposals of Homes England land. In order to do that, we try to sort of address the way that we were doing the disposal process. So we put less emphasis on the land value in the tenders and increase that weighting on design and quality, of which MMC sits within. Initially, we were concerned about the haircuts that would be taken on land value, as would be one of the perceptions that yourselves highlighted. But in fact, we were pleasantly surprised the haircuts wasn't as short as we first thought they would be, and we were really impressed with the level of sort of innovation that was coming through. So this is an R&D program, and the purpose of this is to source and monitor that project data, use it to improve the learning outcomes and understanding MMC technologies. And we plan on doing that by releasing 6 annual reports until all of the sites within the program are built out. The launch of the R&D initiative also came out as a key commitment from the MHCLG Action Plan, who obviously are our sponsor body. The sites themselves, and this was a really crucial part of the project, we put together 8 sites, and what we wanted to do was try and help bust some of those myths. So one of the first myths is that it only works in certain areas because of high values or low values, so to speak. So we got a real varied amount of geography in there. There's a site sort of representing nearly every region. The other one was around size. We also heard the accusation that it only worked at certain sizes, around 150 unit plus. Well, you can see in there, we've still got 600 unit home sites. We've also got a small down as sort of 30 homes and those middle categories as well. So we've got real variation in there. We didn't want this to be a sort of a modular R&D program. We really wanted to showcase all the types of MMC, so anything across Cat 1 and Cat 2. So we've got a good variation again of modular, panelised, both open and closed, and also a light gauge steel frame. And as you can see from those that are in contract, there's a varied sort of amount of developers that are involved. Yes, they are all of a larger nature. However, in order to get all these sort of strategic objectives within the programme, we had to sort of dispose of these sites through our building lease, which is through DPP, and therefore it was anybody that was on that programme that could get one of these sites. Well, so where we are today, we're currently collecting data on 2 sites. We're scheduled to have the 3rd in the study by autumn. The first 2 have been subjected to what we call a data collection trial, and that was to make sure that the processes and the methodology that we designed sort of suited both the research team and the developers, and that they were comfortable with how they'd go and extract the data and submit it to the cloud system that we were pulling it from. The results were largely positive. We're in a position now to roll this out amongst all of the other developers. We've identified sort of where we might need to deploy some further assistance. So we've got some more traditional house builders that are involved in the study, and they've put their hands up and suggested, you know, we're new to this, we might need a bit more assistance, and we're able to deploy some sort of research staff to help with that. The first annual report, so the one of 6, we're planning to release in early 2022. We think this would be the most significant, if not sort of joint, in terms of the amount of data that we're able to produce. We've got a real varied amount of technologies in there, so we're really looking forward to being able to share that all with yourselves. Then we're moving on to the DPP, and I mentioned about driving innovation on our land. We've been mandating MMC on our DPP land sales for about 2 to 3 years. So therefore, we'll be sort of legally obliging them to deliver on the MMC that they tender. We're really proud of these numbers in the middle of the screen. So from about 18, 19, we were getting around 2,000 homes on our land. We then doubled that and then significantly increased that again. So you can see in a short space of time, we've really upscaled that number. And we're also continuing on an upward trajectory into this year as well. So we're really proud of that. Some people might be aware that DPP is being shelved and is making way for the new DPS system, but this doesn't change our commitment to mandating MMC, and that will continue on into the autumn when DPS properly kicks off. This is the slide that we're most proud of. We're in a unique position at Homes England that we're receiving tenders on a monthly basis in large volumes. So we've got a level of data that not a lot of the industry can get their hands on. And we've been able to track the sort of technologies that are appearing within them tenders through a yearly basis. So starting in 2017, it was almost exclusively Cat 3 and 5, looking at those non-structural components. Around 18, we started to see more labour-saving products coming into the tenders. 19 was where it really picked up for us. We got a massive increase in uptake of Category 2 systems. This was around the time when Countryside started speaking to us about opening their own factory. So we were really getting some buy-in into this. And for the first time, we started to see some Cat 1 come into it as well. Then in 2020, it was really closed panel systems were almost becoming the norm, which was really positive to see. We had greater use of volumetric, and particularly on those sites where we'd done similar to the Research Commission and we'd adjusted the tender process, we put more emphasis on quality than price. We really saw some ambitious stuff coming through. The results were so positive that we're sort of looking at the idea of maybe doing that on a more regular footing moving forward. And then I'll pass back to Bersha, who will run you through some of the broad range of investment deals that we're doing.
Thanks. I thought it'd be worth talking about some of the investment deals that we do before we come on to the affordable housing grant. It's worth remembering that we do provide loan to some of the suppliers. And the first one on the list is Ilke Homes. It's on the Building Better framework, I understand. They've had some exciting deals in the last day. So one in Nottingham with Boots. But for a background, Ilke Homes, we know, is a productivity growth and construction industry. It was the construction industry that has been constrained in the capacity. And from our loan funding, we are supporting that delivery from Ilke Homes. They've actually built up a capacity to something like 6,000 homes. And over the 5-year period, it's building really quickly. I think I won't spend too much time on it. I think it's the one supply that everybody probably knows really well. Sekisu, that's a JV, different type of funding from Homes England, but it's all loan funding, debt funding, equity investment. And this one, really interesting for us because although Sekisu are unknown in the UK, they are actually really well known outside the UK, have a 60-year history, 20,000 employees. And for us, the first and probably one of our largest investments to help bolster the supply chain in the UK. And the third one that we were going to mention also, I believe maybe on the framework, is Top Hat Group. This one's on the list just to illustrate that rather than a particular supplier, this is site specific. There were 50 homes, all for the open market. And actually the loan funding helped deliver really quickly with quite high value, quite high quality open market housing. So it's just a really quick gallop, a small example of the types of investments that we're doing outside the affordable housing programme. So the area that I think people are most interested in is the affordable housing grants. And I'll start right now by explaining that for those of you who submit an expression of interest and application for strategic partnerships, that is going through the process. We are on track, but I'm not here today to be able to share the intelligence that's come back, some of the figures that we've got from those bids. That will come once we're able to announce the outcome of the procurement. What I do want to say is that we are seeking MMC intelligence on the CME side, as well as mandating a requirement through the strategic partnership deals. So if you are a partner that's looking at continuous market engagement, we will be asking questions about what type of MMC. It's the same 7 categories that we've listed on our guidance documents. And what we're doing is we're benchmarking the cost of the different types, because as we get each site in, we'll be looking at it in quite a lot of detail. Who's supplying it, when, how, what's the deal, what's the quality. And as we gather it, a couple of years in, we'll probably have quite a lot of intelligence. So at this moment, I can't tell you that you can have an extra £5,000 a unit or £10,000 a unit. There is no fixed grant per unit by type of MMC. From the strategic partnerships, it's really useful for us because we have mandated it. And the interesting thing on that site is that it's not only the 7 categories, but we're also looking at where over 55% of the MMC might be pre-manufactured value. So collectively across the site, if over 55% of it is pre-manufactured, that's also of interest to us. We did invite bidders to tell us how much grant they may wish to bid for to upscale on the MMC categories. I'm really sorry that we're not there yet to be able to share the outcome, but it will come in due course. And for the strategic partnerships, you'll know that we have a series of forums and mechanisms, learning events targeted for strategic partnerships. And it's a space that we're going to build. And like Jimmy said earlier with the research project, there's a lot more to come. Just to be clear that on the MMC, we are particularly interested in the categories 1 and 2. So again, good link to the framework that Building Better today are talking about. It's a good start. Everybody will know, if you are bidding for affordable housing grant, that some of the criteria that we have in our capital funding guide doesn't change. We still expect to secure 60-year life, and that's not how long the grant sits. The grant sits in the in the land and in the projects in perpetuity, but a minimum life of the product that's built, the homes that are built, have to be 60 years, and all homes need to be mortgageable and warranted and be able to be insured. That's the same whichever funding route or program you're in. And the final screen I've got on affordable housing is for the CME, because what we do realise is that the questions that we're asking are quite complex on IMS, particularly this screen where we're separating whether it's what type of MMC there is by primary structure, non-primary structure, and then other off-site, on-site type areas of MMC. We do acknowledge this is a particularly complicated screen, and what we're going to do is probably come out with some guidance, a further guidance to help people navigate this screen while we work on getting it changed and updated. And also because this screen was designed to get the new Affordable Homes Programme launched very quickly at the beginning of March, actually, for 21-26. We now need to go back and review how the 55% PMV might be captured for CME bidding alongside our strategic partnerships. So that's a really quick gallop on the affordable housing and some of our investments. And I'll hand it back to you, Jimmy.
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. So most importantly to finish off is that we received such a positive reception in regards to the MMC Research Commission that we understand it's actually our responsibility to do a lot more in sort of the educational space. So we're really trying to use today's opportunity to understand how it is that we can help you further. So by unblocking those barriers that sort of Jake raised in that poll earlier. So we're keen to try and sort of get as much intelligence as we can to help try and shape and deliver that learning. So one of the ideas we've got already is obviously sharing the outcomes from the strategic partnerships. That goes without saying, and we'll be doing that as soon as we can. Another avenue that we can share some learning through is the Local Government Centre of Excellence, particularly through the winter programme, and we're working up some ideas of how we can do that. We're planning on bringing back the Affordable Housing Team Partner events. Again, another avenue that we'll get learning through, and hopefully you can look out for some dates coming too. But ultimately, I think at Homes England, we need to get better at sharing that good practice. We're uniquely placed in the sector that we're involved in all different types of projects, whether that be through investment teams, land disposals, or through affordable housing. So we see it from all different angles, and we probably need to be a lot better at showcasing some of those schemes and sharing the learning that we've embarked on, because it's a nascent industry and we're learning just as much as everybody else is. But crucially, what I want to raise by putting this bullet point is understanding where you are on this journey. I think sometimes at Homes England we forget that we don't actually build a single home. So therefore, we're not doing the process from day one to practical completion. It's people like yourselves that are doing that. So we're heavily reliant on you sharing with us where your pain points are along that journey, so that we can design learning or educational pieces that hit the nail on the head and really start to unblock those things that are limiting the uptake of MMC. So please, if possible, populate the chat with some suggestions or some questions. If not, please, then my email address is there. Get in touch with me directly. We'll be collecting all this intelligence and sharing it internally, and hopefully be able to turn that around into some useful learning webinars moving forward. But that's everything from version I for now. So I'm happy to take a couple of questions, or if we're passing back to Jake.
Jimmy, thank you, Versha. I understand there's a couple of hands up. What we would request, actually, if people could put their questions into the comment bar, and then we can fill those with both Jimmy and Versha. So I guess what we'll do as well, just initially, is Lucinda, if you could put the initial poll back up, just to sort of refresh where we thought we were, and if there's any questions. Chat bar as well. We'll wait for any questions to come through. What I'll do, Jimmy and Versha, if I maybe bring you back in when we get some questions that sort of come through, I can bring you back into that. With the poll on the screen, we might just sort of reflect on that. There's two things that are really stand out there, aren't there, which is the product and the perception of costs. And I guess once we go into the panel discussion, it'll be really interesting to try and drive that conversation a little bit. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel members, Stephen, Glynis, and Helen. Hi all. So to get the kind of ball rolling, and as we said, please comment in the comment section, and we'll bring that into the conversation. But to get the ball rolling, please, it'd be interesting to find from the panel of what they believe are the biggest opportunities around MMC that supports their business drivers, and also some of the tensions that have kind of come around that as well. So I think we're going to start, if I come over to you, Stephen, that'd be great.
Thanks, Jake. Business drivers. I guess just thinking about so Abra's journey with MMC, and it's fair to say that I think the business drivers have changed. So we embarked on our journey with MMC and looking at procurement probably 4 years ago, and that was in partnership with Advantage Southwest, procurement consortium in the Southwest, and working with Altair, actually, who did a piece of research for us. And that was really in many ways driven by the skills shortage. And there was a particular trigger in the Southwest at that point, and that was the development of Hinkley Point C, the nuclear power station, and it was appearing on the risk register of many housing associations about that emerging skills shortage, and the fact that we were going to be unable to meet targets potentially to deliver new homes. MMC then appeared as an opportunity for more efficient delivery, factory produced housing, and delivery that ideally we could create factories and manufacturing plants in the Southwest, but in the short term, actually, we could procure from existing manufacturers that were established and not suffer potential shortages of skills or hikes in cost, etc., that go with that. I think that journey's changed along the way, and whilst there's still that need and that balance with delivering MMC and traditional, I think there's also a key driver now around sustainability, and just that huge pressure that the sector faces, and I think colleagues will probably talk a little bit more about that. So I'll leave them to touch on that. Just, you asked about tensions. So tensions in terms of why it's taken this long. One tension has been aggregation. So just not being able to aggregate the demand to get behind a number or a handful of providers in order to get the efficiencies, and if I'm honest, in order to get the influence. So to become a client that influences the product rather than the client that just acquires a product that's been designed for us rather than by us. And I think some of the other challenges with this perception that it might be unaffordable, it might be more expensive than traditional, and whether we could charge it, and that whole financial business model of a housing association where you build, charge, draw down the funds to build again. So I think those were some of the tensions that we've experienced along the way, and I'm sure we can touch on those as
I wonder if I can,
continues.
yeah, thank you. I wonder if I can bring Glynis into that actually, because I know they've done some market, sort of soft market testing with the Building Better framework on the costings. And I think that might help to answer Alan Gates' question, which is MMC 5%? Glynis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the key driver really for Live West becoming part of the Building Better framework was about the structure of the framework, and that having that cost certainty, because inevitably you hear lots of stories about MMC being much more expensive. Actually, what we're seeing at the moment in the construction market with supply chain and with cost increase in materials, even before what was going on with the supply chain, actually we've done some work on looking at what we've been procuring over the last 18 months. And the MMC costings that we're getting through the Building Better framework are pretty comparable, actually, and they get even more comparable when you start to look at the journey to operational net zero. And similar to Stephen and Abri, definitely we see MMC aligning really nicely with our sustainability agenda and our drive to net zero carbon. I think in terms of tensions, I think what's interesting for us at Live West is, MMC is quite a broad subject. We've delivered homes using various forms of MMC over the years, and most of that has been driven by contractor choice, or it's been driven again by the supply chain market and resourcing. For instance, we've had issues with getting bricklaying contractors down in Cornwall. So inevitably you try and build with some form of timber frame down there where we have got timber frame suppliers. So I think we were pushed into doing MMC because actually that's what the market was driving us to do. I think becoming part of Building Better has been a conscious decision by Live West to recognise that actually when we start to certainly look at the modular homes that we're starting to see in factories, the manufacturing process drives so many efficiencies and improved quality, improved net on the journey to net zero carbon, that actually it was something we really wanted to get involved in. Obviously, most latterly, the requirement through the Homes England strategic funding programme to deliver 25%. In terms of tensions, the one thing that we saw a lot through the early days of delivering through with MMC has been around the procurement side and the form of contract. And that's obviously key for when we start to look at modular homes, but actually also the lending and securitization side. So, we've had schemes where we've had shared owners struggling to get a shared ownership mortgage, and we've had to move them around various providers because the providers and the valuers, more importantly, either don't understand the product or they're not happy with their risk profile on that site. And I think what's really exciting over the last couple of months has been this agreement between JLL and Savills at a national level with an agreed information standard that is now being rolled out to lenders and to valuers. And we know a number of the lenders that are adopting an MMC policy. So, that for us was quite a big barrier, and that barrier is actually being broken down, and that tension is being removed, which is really good news.
Yeah. An interesting question that's come through actually is about the topography and the difficulties of delivering MMC on different sites. How do you sort of see that working or evolving in the sector?
yeah, I mean, for us in this, I mean, I don't know where the participants are, but certainly in the Southwest, we definitely have some topographical challenges. You know, the first framework that's just been launched for Building Better is Category 1, which is the volumetric. Absolutely, it tends to work better on generally flatter sites. For us in our geography in the Southwest, we definitely see that having a place around west of England, Somerset down into Devon. The next framework Building Better are working on at the moment is panelized, and I think, you know, panelized definitely has is more varied. It can be used on sites that tend to have much more topographical challenges. So yeah, I mean, there are options out there. Volumetric modular homes in the factory but coming down on a lorry might not be for every site, but I think there are other forms of MMC out there. And obviously Category 2 is also within the Homes England strategic funding, 25%, which is important.
Stephen, I think you wanted to.
Yeah, I think, as with anything as well, you know, I agree with what Glynis has said, but I think as we go on this journey, that will come. And you know, right at the beginning, there wasn't the aggregation. There was a small number of suppliers, or there was a reasonable number of suppliers, but actually the products were quite limited. And I think as we aggregate demand, and the sector, driven by our own ambitions, driven by the 25% requirement of Homes England, get behind products and the demand increases, then actually the manufacturers will start to respond to that demand and will develop new products, so we can get better stepped products, for example, on sloping sites, etc. I think it will come. So to, I think it's Dermot's question. I think to Dermot's question, I think there's you know, I don't know if we've got an immediate solution. I think where we are is good, and I think the panelized system, as Glynis points out, will improve on the volumetric system. But I think all of it will develop, and I think the more of us that get behind products now, I think the more R&D will come, and the more development and better products there'll be in the future.
So aligned with that, there's a question that's come from Alex Hughes. So do the panel think clearer guidance on innovative methods of procurement, collaboration and risk sharing for MMC solutions would be helpful? So clearer guidance on that procurement route.
Oh, I'll let Glynis.
We both turned off at the same time. Yeah, I mean, yeah, procurement was a big thing for it. I mean, you know, you read about the benefits of MMC and they are widespread, but actually a lot of the benefits are properly realised when you can incorporate MMC as early in the design process as possible. And you know, again, for Live West, the benefit of Building Better is this direct call off. You know, they've gone through that sort of tender procurement process, done all the due diligence, checked that they've got the right accreditations, and it gives us that route to market and enables us to have those conversations early whilst being compliant with, you know, with OJEU. I've only been in sector 5 years, and I have to say the whole procurement side of things is one of those kind of areas that I'm not a procurement expert by all means, but it's been a challenge, and it's really is a challenge when it comes to MMC. So yeah, I do think there probably does need to be some advice about and options as well. You know, there are other frameworks available. It's, you know, we're here because we're all members of Building Better and we're big believers in it, but there are other frameworks available, other procurement options, and you have to choose what's right for your organisations. But there probably does need to be some guidance to try and signpost people to what are the pros and cons of different procurement options out there.
There was another quite interesting point from the poll about the product and about the sort of challenges and tribulations behind that. It was really interesting to see Homes England's kind of red lines, as it were, which are very much aligned with Building Betters, which we're thankful for. But also about the line between the sort of products and how do you select what you want and what you don't want. And I think, Helen, if I can draw you into the conversation, because you're very much focused on adaptability and the future changes, certainly around COVID. I wonder if the panel could sort of discuss how we navigate what product's right and what we're sort of looking for in that.
Thank you, Jake. I'm just interested in what in this whole notion of collaboration as well, and the opportunity. So if I start with the point of, is it opportunity or is it actually we have just gone through a pandemic. We are still in a pandemic. The world has changed and people's needs, all of our needs have changed. Inequalities are greater. You could argue there is even a more urgent need for building faster, decent homes, but also homes that really recognise the level of disability in its broadest form, and recognise that all of us at some point in our lives are more likely now, with demographics and with COVID, to need a home that can be accessible in its broadest form, and that building that home is also about how do you do that quickly so the inequalities don't grow even further, but how do you do that in collaboration with the wider system. So for me, there's something really just that challenge about, if it's not going to be MMC, what is it going to be that's going to deliver homes to people rapidly that can start to recognise and respond to some of the challenges around our wider health. And linked to that is also, we've clearly had a period of time when we've had many people living, not living on the streets, but living on homes in accommodation. How do we really rapidly respond to a group of people who now do want something different? So I think there's lots of challenges about, if it's not to be this sort of opportunity, then what's the other opportunity? So that's one thing. And then just coming back to the point about, particularly about the product and things like that. So the assumptions at the moment in all housing are very much built on able-bodied assumptions. They're very much about, when it comes to viability, environmental cost will often compromise accessibility. So can we design things that really do promote a broader notion of accessibility, but going alongside that, recognise the enormous impact and cost of not doing it on things like social care, the health system, and that broader business case. And certainly in developing one of the schemes in Dorset, there was an awful lot of work to do in collaborating in building a business case that was a true system community building business case, not just the housing association and or the local authority and the NHS. So you could actually make it stack up in that broadest picture, and that requires us all to work a little differently and have a more open-minded approach to collaboration.
Thank you, Helen. You've given me an excellent segue into how has our panel approached the board and got board on side to deliver this. So if I could go to the panel and sort of ask, how did you take your board on this journey to MMC?
I can kick off if you like. I think there's certainly, and I span a number of boards, I guess, because I'm part of the Building Better board. I'm part of the Advantage Southwest board, and then obviously I'm employed by Avery. But I think speaking for the Advantage Southwest board in particular, I guess, because it's Advantage Southwest that have joined Building Better, then certainly I think the board took us on the journey, and I think using, as I touched on earlier on, identifying that risk that was on the horizon in terms of construction skills. I think the board set the target to understand how we could bring forward MMC on a wider scale. And I think what soon became apparent when we researched and understood the barriers to why MMC hadn't mainstreamed or hadn't become a success previously, that was all about aggregation and collaboration. And so I think the journey that we've been on is about collaboration. And I know Helen's just touched on that, and just some of the points that Helen made. I think that we haven't had a great deal of choice and influence on products in the sector previously. And I think now, by by the sector, and you know, the different frameworks that are forming, Building Better being one of them. I think that collaboration and aggregation is giving the sector a joined up voice to say, actually, these are the products we need. This is the diversity of the client group that we house our customer base. And so these are the products we need. Just touching on the board that, of ABRI, again, very early on, our board set me a fairly ambitious target to deliver 25% of our program as MMC, and it was rather convenient that Homes England then set a very similar target actually. And so that was the target, and it was very much about go out and research how we could do that. And again, we've formed some partnerships, and one of those is the one with Building Better, others with Book, Luke, and others out there, Ilka. And actually, I think again it came back down to collaboration, to understanding the choice of products out there, but choosing values-based partners who were willing to work with us and give us that choice and that influence, rather than give us a product that actually we had to compromise. So I think that's I don't know if that answers the question, but it kind of, that's the journey we've been on, and our position we now find ourselves is working in partnership to get that greater voice and to influence.
So it sounds like really boards want it. There's real appetite, and taking them on that journey is more about bringing the right products through the right compliant route to market is sort of key. So I guess with that in mind as well, once you got the board on board, that's great, but actually, how do you take the rest of the teams with it? The asset management, the long-term kind of maintenance, and the customer service experience. I think there was a question about how do customers feel about living in an MMC property. It'd be interesting just to get the view.
Yeah, I mean, I think we at Live West, like I say, we've built with various forms of MMC, and it's been a case of using the right product for the right home on the right site at that point in time. So we've not necessarily had to take the teams and the board on a particular journey. I think when you start to look at modular and true panelized systems, I think the way the home and the timescales the homes come into the business is quite different. And so we're running a workshop later this year using a consultancy to help facilitate that discussion with our lettings teams and our neighbourhoods and our asset management team, to look at actually, do we need to adapt any of the way we work a little bit? I think there was a question around cost in the Q&A box, and actually I think whether it's perceived extra cost, whether it's actual extra cost, and I think there is an element that we are trying to price modular systems and modular sites the same way we've always priced traditionally built sites. And I do think there needs to be some nuance in the way we run these schemes through our business viabilities. And I think we probably need to be, dare I say it, a little bit more intelligent about the way we look at the maintenance and management liabilities for those homes going forward. And that's something we're definitely looking at doing in Live West. We're not there yet. We don't have the answers, but that's something we're doing to take our teams on the journey. And I guess a bit like Stephen, really, ABRI, we've never had to have that sort of really hard board discussion. The board have kind of always been there with us, and certainly the exec team. Even our finance director has always been very pro MMC. Everybody has always seen the benefits of it. It really has about trying to knock down some of these barriers. And the good thing for us is actually the recognition that Building Better for us as an organisation knocks down a number of those barriers. And hopefully we'll start to deliver schemes through that framework fairly quickly.
An interesting point when you say about cost, I think you're right in terms of the parameters, is we can actually deliver homes a lot quicker. It's around 50% quicker. So you're lending, your rents in quicker, the prelims are reduced. Stephen, I think you're going to come in there. Sorry.
It was only to build on what Glynis had said, actually. And I think for the sector, for a lot of organisations, a lot of boards, MMC's, it's really complex, and it's really difficult. There's so many products out there. You know, Versha was talking about the 55% PMV. You know, just kind of trying to get your head around that really, and I think. And I don't wish to keep using the word collaboration, but I will. But I think actually looking at what's being achieved, and with any new innovative product, with any development, an organization has to do is thorough due diligence. But actually, when you're going into a new territory, new area like MMC and a new product, and working with a different manufacturer, there's kind of enhanced due diligence that needs to be done. And the fact that Building Better have kind of done a lot of that, and whilst we'd all have to do it, when you go to Building Better, many of the questions are pre-answered. It's just making it just a little bit easier and a little bit more accessible. And I think that's the journey that modern method construction has been on over a number of years, really. And I think the information and the way that the framework's been set up actually makes it a lot more accessible for organisations that just haven't necessarily got the answers to those questions, because, as I say, they are, from my experience, pre-answered now.
I've got Helen. I think you want to jump.
Yeah, I was just going to add in that this is a hearts and minds thing in local communities as well. So landing that politically with a small p and a big P, getting people to be enthusiastic, actually, and that point about how do residents feel? Well, for many people, they don't know, they're not checking, they're not hearing how it feels to live. So they come with all sorts of preconceptions. So we know in the schemes and some of the work we're doing at the moment, bringing people with you at every level, whether it is your housing management, your letting teams, people who interface, is really, really important in terms of getting to a business case. Everybody can feel that they're behind. It's not always just the adding up, it's the hearts and minds of people. And that's why I particularly wanted to push the point about the world's changed. Your biggest business driver is now, this is key to local recovery, and also being able to cope with a whole new set of demands on the system that people perhaps haven't quite understood yet.
We are close to time, but I've got a really good and a challenging question from Dermot. How has Building Better Group been dealing with the issue of liability when a difficulty does occur? An MMC framework is like nominating a product. So how have we navigated that within Building Better? Stephen?
I'm happy to go. I'm always one to favour dodging the difficult and challenging questions, but I'm happy to leap in. It's a really good question, and obviously a difficult issue in the sector. I think Building Better recognise this quite early on. And so the way the framework's been set up is that we have 3 manufacturers, and we can call off their products, and if an organisation wants to call off the product and work with it, that's absolutely fine. But equally, if the organisation wants just a full turnkey solution, so you haven't got that split in liability in terms of the product and the contractors, etc., actually the framework is procured to do exactly that. So it gives choice, really. It maximizes choice to those that want to call off. So I hope that responds to the question. I'm conscious of time as well, but if it doesn't, pick it up with us separately, Dermot.
No, thank you. I'm going to just thank you for the panel there. Some sort of really interesting points and some great questions from the audience. Just before I sort of do a bit of a roundup, well, actually, it'd be interesting to sort of do that roundup, really. It's hearing from Homes England really does bode well for the Building Better framework, because we're absolutely aligned with what they're doing, what their red lines are. That's very, very in tune. I think some of the product questions that have come out are also very interesting. The robust route to market that Building Better went through with procurement for housing was extremely long and thorough, and actually believe that we've got and selected the right partners for us. And I'm going to come back to Versha and Jimmy's presentation. They made mention of Ilka, they made mention of Top Hat. They are 2 partners that are on the framework, and as are Impact Modular. So there's some real interesting alignment, I think, there that I think would be quite interesting for the audience, which is great. Some other sort of key takeaways, I guess we didn't delve into it too much, but there was some sort of key themes that are coming through there about the sustainability agenda and that adaptability agenda. And actually we see that MMC does form hand in glove with this, that they are driving the envelope a little bit towards more sustainable fabric first approaches. And absolutely they're adaptable as well. So that kind of does hopefully feed into that. We also did speak about cost, which was the biggest sort of challenge at the start. And I think there's some really interesting myth bust kind of piece of work that coming out lately. Glynis, you've alluded to your own kind of experience of doing that testing. And I know that in Building Better, we're going to be forming some really interesting data analysis to be able to share with members and future members about the average cost per square meter, which is the $1 million question that we're always asked. I guess just before we close, we wanted to do one final poll. The final poll would be thinking back on the barriers that we've discussed throughout the session, and really just to get a temperature gauge of, do you feel that some of these barriers have overcome? Now, there's no correct answer to this, because actually, if it's yes, great, but if it's no, we would request that you come and talk to us and talk to Trina, the project director at Building Better, myself, Stephen, Glynis, Helen, about what we're doing at Building Better for some more detail, and the guys at PFH, Rob and Dan. So yeah, it'd be great if everyone can sort of do just yes or no. As I said, there's no wrong answer really, and just to sort of see where we are. I'll wait for the results in anticipation to come up. Wow. Hey, Homes England, Versha and Jimmy, thank you. And to the panelists, thank you, because I think you've provided some really great information throughout the sort of session. There's going to be a slide that pops up in a minute, and that is about getting in touch with Trina Chakravarti, who's the project director at Building Better. But just want to thank you again, Versha, Jimmy, Stephen, Glynis and Helen. Thank you so much for your time today. And also thank you so much for all of the audience participation and for spending the time out of your diary today. You'll also notice there is another event where we will have the Housing Minister, Christopher Pincher, here on the 15th of September. So please come and join us again. I know that he is absolutely supportive of MMC and also the Building Better project. So thank you so much for everyone's time today, and hope to see you again soon.